$25,000. That's what Karen demanded I pay, just to register my French Bulldog. But when I discovered where that money was really going, it didn't just destroy her career. Unraveled 15 years of lies buried in HOA files. The envelope sat on my kitchen counter for 3 days before I opened it. Something about the Riverside Estates HOA logo, that pretentious gold-embossed crest with the intertwined arcelloys, made my stomach turn. But this time the certified mail sticker meant I couldn't ignore it. Inside was a single sheet of cream-colored paper, and the number at the bottom made me read it 4 times to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. Pet registration fee for designer breed classification, $25,000. I stood there in my kitchen, holding my 3-year-old French Bulldog, Duchess, who had absolutely no idea she'd just become the most expensive pet in Georgia. My hands shook as I read the letter again. Dear Ms. Rebecca Morrison, pursuant to the newly amended Riverside Estates Pet Policy, Section 7, Paragraph C, all residents owning dogs classified as designer breeds must register said animals with the Homeowners Association and remit the appropriate registration fee within 30 days of policy implementation. Failure to comply will result in fines of $500 per day and potential legal action. The letter was signed in aggressive, slanted handwriting. Karen Mitchell, HOA President. Of course, it was Karen. I'd lived in Riverside Estates for 8 years. It was one of those neighborhoods that looked perfect in the real estate photo-street-lined streets. Manicured lawns, a community pool that sparkled like something from a resort brochure. But perfection came with a price, and that price was Karen Mitchell. Karen had been HOA president for 15 years. 15 years of petty violations, absurd rules, and a reign of terror that made people scared to plant the wrong color flowers. She was in her late 50s, always dressed like she was heading to a country club board meeting, silk-pressed slacks, and those ridiculous oversized sunglasses she wore even indoors. Her blonde hair was cut in a severe bob that somehow matched her personality, and she had a smile that never reached her eyes. But $25,000, even for Karen, this was insane. I grabbed my phone and called my neighbor, Tom Chun. He answered on the second ring. "Tell me you got the letter," I said, "about the pet fee." "Yeah, I got it, except mine says 15,000. 15. Mine says 25. What kind of dog do you have?" "A French Bulldog." Tom laughed, but it was the kind of laugh that had no humor in it. "I've got a golden doodle. Apparently, your dog is $10,000 more designer than mine." "Rebecca, this is insane. There are 73 homes in this neighborhood. If even half of us have dogs, that's over $1 million. I finished. The silence on the other end lasted too long. "Tom, I'm going to the emergency HOA meeting tomorrow night," he said quietly. "You should come to. Something about this isn't right." The meeting was held at the community center, a building that Karen had insisted on renovating 3 years ago at a cost of $200,000. The marble floors gleamed. The crown molding looked like it belonged in a palace, and the chandelier in the main meeting room had cost more than my car. 47 residents showed up, the largest turnout in Riverside Estates history. The room buzzed with angry voices, people clutching their certified letters, some holding their confused dogs. Karen sat at the head table on a raised platform, flanked by 2 other board members, Richa Delacroix, the treasurer, who always looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, and Patricia Huang, the secretary, who spent most meetings just nodding along to whatever Karen said. Karen's expression was calm. To come. She wore a cream blazer and a pearl necklace, and when she smiled at the crowd, I felt my blood pressure rise. "I'm glad so many of you could attend," Karen began, her voice syrupy sweet. "I know the new pet policy has raised some questions." Questions? A man in the back row stood up. "You want me to pay $18,000 to keep my That's not a question. That's extortion." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. Karen's smile didn't waver. She raised one hand, and somehow, impossibly, the room quieted. "I understand your concerns," she said, "but let me explain the reasoning behind this policy. designer breed dogs, French Bulldogs, Golden Doodles, Bernedoodles, and others require specialized community resources, waste management, landscaping repairs, liability insurance adjustments. These costs add up. The registration fee ensures that our community standards remain high and that all residents share the financial burden appropriately. Appropriately? I stood up before I could stop myself. My dog weighs 20 pounds and uses less grass than a hut. What specialized resources could possibly justify $25,000? Karen's eyes locked onto mine. For just a second, something cold flickered across her face. Ms. Morrison, isn't it? I believe your property also has 3 minor landscaping violations that need to be addressed. We can discuss those after the meeting, if you'd like. It was a threat, a blatant, public threat. But I didn't sit down. Show us the numbers, I said. If these fees are based on actual costs, show us the breakdown. Show us the invoices, the insurance adjustments, the waste management contracts. Prove that this isn't just you making up numbers. The room went silent. Even Richard looked uncomfortable. Karen's smile finally faded. She leaned forward, both hands flat on the table. The HOA board has full discretionary authority over community fees and policies. That authority was granted by the covenant you signed when you purchased your home. If you have concerns about board decisions, there is a formal complaint process outlined in Section 12 of the governing documents. But I will not sit here and have my integrity questioned by someone who can't even keep a mailbox the approved shade of black. She stood up, gathering her papers. This meeting is adjourned. The pet registration deadline stands. 30 days. Non-compliance will result in fines and legal action. She walked out, heels clicking on that expensive marble floor. But as she passed my row, she paused, just for a second, and she looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read, part anger, part something else. Something that looked almost like fear. "You should be careful, Ms. Morrison," she said softly. "Accidents happen to people who ask too many questions." Then she was gone. I couldn't sleep that night. Karen's threat echoed in my head. But more than that, something about the whole situation felt wrong. The numbers were too specific. 25,000, 18,000, 15,000. Not round estimates, exact amounts. At 2 in the morning, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop and started searching. Riverside Estates HOA, financial records, public documents. In Georgia, HOA financial records are supposed to be available to homeowners, but Karen had always made it nearly impossible to access. Them requests had to be submitted in writing, reviewed by the board, and were often denied for privacy reasons. But property records were public. Construction permits were public, and if Karen had spent $200,000 renovating the community center 3 years ago, there should be a paper trail. I found the permit application within 20 minutes. Estimated cost, $75,000. I sat back in my chair, my heart pounding. Karen had told the neighborhood the renovation cost $200,000. The permit said $75,000. That was a difference of $125,000. Where did the extra money go? I grabbed my phone and texted Tom, "We need to talk tomorrow. I found something." His response came immediately. My house, 10 a.m., and Rebecca. "Bring your lawyer!" Because what I was about to discover wasn't just about a pet policy. It was about 15 years of missing money, forged invoices, and a conspiracy that reached far beyond one corrupt HOA president. And Karen? She knew I was getting close. The question was, how far would she go to keep her secrets buried? What would you do if your HOA demanded $25,000 for your pet? Drop your thoughts in the comments and wait until you see what Rebecca finds in those financial records. You won't believe where this goes next. Tom's house smelled like coffee and anxiety when I arrived. At 10 a.m., he'd already set up his dining room table like a war room laptop open, printer humming, stacks of paper everywhere. "I couldn't sleep either," he said, handing me a mug. So I started digging. "Rebecca, you were right. Something is very, very wrong." He spread 3 documents across the table. This is the community pool renovation from 2018. Karen told us it cost $150,000. The actual contractor invoice, $62,000. He pointed to another paper, the new entrance gate system from 2020. Karen said $220,000. Real cost, according to the permit, $95,000. And the landscaping contract renewal last year, I added, pulling up my own research on my phone. Karen announced a special assessment of $800 per household to cover increased maintenance costs, but I found the actual landscaping company contract. The increase was only $3,000 total for the entire neighborhood. With 73 homes, that special assessment brought in $58,400. Tom sat down heavily. So where did the other $55,000 go? Into Karen's pocket, said a voice from the doorway. We both spun around. Patricia Huang stood there, the HOA secretary, still in her pajamas. Her eyes were red like she'd been crying. Patricia? Tom stood up. What are you? I live for houses down, she said quietly. I saw Rebecca arrive. I knew what you were doing. She stepped inside, closing the door behind her. And I need to tell you everything before someone gets hurt. She sat down at the table, her hands shaking. I've been HOA secretary for 12 years. For 12 years, I've watched Karen steal from this neighborhood. And I helped her do it. The room went silent. It started small. Patricia continued. A few thousand here and there. Padding contractor invoices, creating fake vendors for services that were never performed. Karen would handle the payments. Reacher would sign off on the checks. He never actually looked at the numbers, and I would record everything in the minutes. Official, legal, documented. How much? I asked. Patricia's voice broke. Over 15 years. I estimate around $2,300,000. Tom's coffee mug hit the table. $2 million? The designer, dog policy. Patricia looked at me. That wasn't about covering costs. Karen needs money. Foster's been getting sloppy lately. The fake invoices are getting easier to spot. I think someone might be investigating her, maybe the state, maybe the IRS. I don't know. But she's desperate. That pet registration money? She was planning to take it and run. Run where? Tom demanded. There's a property in Costa Rica. I've seen the emails. She's been planning this for 6 months. She was going to collect the pet fees, transfer everything offshore, and disappear. Leave Richard to take the fall. Leave the neighborhood bankrupt. Leave all of us with nothing. I felt sick. Do you have proof? Documents? Emails? Patricia pulled a USB drive from her pocket. Everything. Everything. 15 years of forged invoices, fake vendor contracts, bank transfers. I made copies of everything 6 months ago, when I realized how bad this had gotten. I kept them as insurance in case Karen tried to blame me. She slid the drive across the table. I'm done being complicit. I'm done being scared. Take it! Expose her! Just, please don't let me go to jail. Tom picked up the drive like it might explode. Patricia, why didn't you come forward sooner? Because Karen threatened my family, she whispered. 3 years ago, I told her I wanted to resign from the board. The next day, someone broke into my house. Nothing was stolen, but everything in my daughter's room was moved. Pictures turned face, jewelry scattered. Karen called me that night and said, I hope everyone in your family stays safe. I got the message. My hands clenched into fists. She's been blackmailing you for 3 years. Not just me. Richard too, probably. And she has dirt on half the neighborhood code violations she's never reported. Affairs she's discovered, financial problems she's learned about. Karen doesn't just run this HOA. She controls it through fear. I looked at Tom. We need to go to the police. No. Patricia grabbed my arm. Not yet. If you go to the police now, Karen will know it was me. She'll destroy evidence. She'll disappear, and she'll make sure I go down with her. We need to be smart about this. Then what do you suggest? Patricia's eyes hardened. We call an emergency vote to remove her from the board. Tonight, Georgia HOA law says that 20% of homeowners can petition for a special election. With this many people angry about the pet policy, we can get the signatures in hours. We vote her out before she knows what's happening. Then we bring in a forensic accountant, document everything, and hand it all to the police with a bow on top. Tom was already typing. I'll start the petition. Rebecca, you start calling neighbors. We need at least 15 signatures to force the vote. We'll get 30, I said, grabbing my phone. By noon. We got 42 signatures by 1 p.m. The emergency election was scheduled for 7 p.m. that same evening. Georgia law required 24 hours notice for special meetings, but our HOA bylaws had a provision for urgent community matters requiring immediate action. The pet policy and the community uproar it caused qualified. Karen tried to block it. Of course, she sent an email to every homeowner at 3 p.m. claiming the petition was invalid, that the signatures were forged, that the whole thing was a conspiracy by residents who refused to follow community standards. But it was too late. The vote was happening. By 6:30 p.m., the community center was packed. 71 of 73 households had representatives present. I'd never seen anything like it. Karen sat at the head table, her expression carved from ice. Richard looked like he wanted to disappear. Patricia sat in the audience with us, her hands folded in her lap, eyes down. Tom stood up to speak first. We're here tonight to vote on the removal of Karen Mitchell as HOA President, based on concerns about financial mismanagement, excessive fees, and lack of transparency. Before we vote, I'd like to present evidence that residents deserve to see. He held up the USB drive. Karen's face went white. This drive contains 15 years of HOA financial records, including contractor invoices, bank statements, and payment authorizations. I'm not going to share specific details tonight. That's for the authorities. But I will say this. There are significant discrepancies between what this board told us things cost and what they actually cost. Hundreds of thousands of dollars in discrepancies. The room erupted. Voices overlapped. People shouting questions. Karen trying to call for order. That's privileged information, Karen shouted. You have no right. We have every right, I said, standing up. These are our community funds. Our money. And if you've been stealing from us for 15 years, we have the right to know. Karen's eyes locked onto mine, and I saw it pure rage. You have no proof of anything, she said, her voice deadly calm. That USB drive could contain anything. Forged documents. Manufactured evidence. This is a witch hunt, led by residents who are simply upset about paying their fair share for community resources. Then show us your records, Tom challenged. Real records. Bank statements. Contractor invoices. If you have nothing to hide, prove it. Karen stood up slowly. She smoothed her blazer, adjusted her pearl necklace, and smiled. I don't have to prove anything to you people. I have served this community faithfully for 15 years. I have maintained property values, enforced standards, and kept this neighborhood beautiful while the rest of you just enjoyed the benefits. And this is how you thank me? By believing lies and conspiracy theories. She picked up her purse. I won't dignify this farce with my presence. Vote however you want. But when the lawsuits start, and they will remember that you brought this on yourselves. She walked toward the exit. Karen. Patricia's voice cut through the room. Karen stopped. Patricia stood up, hands shaking but voice steady. I was the one who gave them the files. I copied everything. Every forged invoice, every fake vendor contract, every bank transfer to your personal accounts. I have 15 years of evidence. And tomorrow morning, I'm taking it to the FBI. The room went silent. Karen turned slowly. Her face had gone from white to red. Her hands clenched into fists. You have no idea what you've just done, she whispered. I know exactly what I've done. Patricia Said, I've stopped being an accomplice to your crimes. Karen looked around the room at the 71 households staring at her, at the evidence of her corruption displayed on the projector screen, at her 15-year empire crumbling in real time. And then she ran. Not walked. Ran. She bolted for the side exit, heels clicking frantically on the marble floor. Tom and 3 other men tried to block her path, but she shoved past them, surprisingly strong for someone her size. She made it to the parking lot, but she didn't make it to her car, because sitting in the parking lot, lights flashing, were 2 police cruisers and an unmarked sedan. A woman in a dark suit stepped out of the sedan, holding up a badge Karen Mitchell. "I'm Special Agent Torres with the FBI Financial Crimes Unit. We've been investigating your HOA for 6 months. We have warrants for your arrest and the seizure of all HOA financial records." Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish, because what she didn't know, what none of us knew until that moment, was that Patricia hadn't waited until tomorrow to contact the FBI. She'd called them 6 months ago. Everything we'd just done, it was all part of a federal investigation. And Karen's crimes, they went so much deeper than any of us imagined. FBI at an HOA meeting. This just went from neighborhood drama to federal case. Comment below. Have you ever suspected your HOA of corruption? And trust me, wait until you hear what the FBI found in Karen's accounts. Special Agent Torres wasn't alone. 4 more agents emerged from the vehicles, along with 2 forensic accountants carrying equipment cases. The parking lot lights cast long shadows as Karen stood frozen, her designer purse still clutched in one hand. "You can't do this," Karen said, her voice shaking. "I have rights. I want my lawyer." "You'll have access to an attorney," Agent Torres replied calmly. "But right now, you're under arrest for wire fraud, embezzlement, and money laundering. Turn around, please." The handcuffs clicked, and something inside me felt both satisfied and deeply sad. 15 years. She'd gotten away with it for 15 years. Inside the community center, Agent Torres addressed the stunned crowd. Patricia sat in the front row, tears streaming down her face. Richard had his head in his hands. "6 months ago, we received a tip from Ms. Huang about financial irregularities in your HOA. Agent Torres began. What we discovered was extensive. Ms. Mitchell created 11 shell companies between 2009 and 2024. She used these fake vendors to invoice your HOA for services never performed. Landscaping, pool maintenance, security systems, legal consultations, all fabricated." Tom raised his hand. "How much total?" $2,700,000. The number hit like a bomb. People gasped. Someone started crying. "But it gets worse," Agent Torres continued. "Ms. Mitchell also filed false insurance claims after minor incidents, collected the payouts, and pocketed the money. She inflated contractor bids, took kickbacks from real vendors, and even embezzled funds from the Community Emergency Reserve." "The Emergency Reserve," Primera stood up. "That's for hurricanes and major repairs. That's our safety net." "Was your safety net?" Agent Torres, "As of this morning, your HOA emergency fund has a balance of $3,200. It should have approximately $480,000. The room exploded in angry shouts. "What about Richard?" Someone yelled. "He's the treasurer. He signed the checks." Richard finally looked up, his face gray. "I trusted her. She said she was handling everything. I just signed what she told me to sign. I thought I was helping." Agent Torres's expression softened slightly. "Mr. Delacroix is cooperating with our investigation. We believe he was negligent, but not criminal. Ms. Wang's cooperation has been invaluable. Without her records, we might never have built our case." Patricia wiped her eyes. "I should have come forward sooner." "I'm so sorry." "You came forward when it mattered," I said, reaching over to squeeze her hand. "That takes courage." Agent Torres pulled up a presentation on her laptop, displaying it on the community center screen. "Here's what we've recovered so far." Ms. Mitchell maintained 3 offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. Total deposits over 15 years, $2,100,000. We've frozen these accounts. We've also identified the Costa Rica property Ms. Huang mentioned purchased 8 months ago for $650,000 cash. That property is now in federal custody. "Will we get our money back?" Tom asked. "Some of it, real estate, can be liquidated. Offshore accounts will be seized. But Ms. Mitchell spent significant amounts on personal expenses, luxury vacations, designer clothing, a Mercedes she registered under a shell company name. We'll recover what we can, but realistically, you should expect to see about 60% return to the HOA over the next 18 months. 60%. Better than nothing. But it meant every household had still lost thousands of dollars. What about the pet policy? Someone called out. Do we still have to pay? AG Torres actually smiled. That policy is void. Ms. Mitchell had no authority to implement fees of that magnitude without a full community vote. You owe nothing. A small cheer went through the crowd. At least something good came from this nightmare. The next morning, I sat in my kitchen with Duchess on my lap, scrolling through news articles on my phone. The story had gone viral. HOA President arrested for $2.7 million embezzlement scheme. Designer dog policy exposes decade of financial fraud. FBI busts corrupt homeowners association leader in Georgia. My phone rang. Tom, have you seen the news? He asked. I'm reading it now. We're famous. Patricia's getting death threats. I sat up straight. What? People online saying she's just as guilty as Karen, that she should go to jail too. It's getting ugly. I'm heading over to her house now. Can you come? I was out the door in 3 minutes. Patricia's house was surrounded by news vans. Reporters shouted questions as Tom and I pushed through to her front door. She let us in quickly, locking the door behind us. I can't leave my house, she said, her voice hollow. They're camped out. They're 24/7. Someone threw a brick through my window last night with a note calling me a thief. You're not a thief, I said firmly. You're a whistleblower. You stopped this. I enabled it for 12 years, first. Tom sat down beside her. Patricia, you were threatened. Your family was in danger. Anyone would have done what you did to protect their child. The FBI doesn't think so. Agent Torres says I might still face charges for my role in the fraud. Conspiracy. Accessory. Even if I cooperate fully. I felt my anger rising again. That's not right. You're the reason they caught Karen. Doesn't matter. I still falsified HOA records. I still helped her hide the money. Patricia looked at both of us with exhausted eyes. I just wanted this to be over. But it's never going to be over, is it? Before we could answer, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. Ms. Morrison. A man's voice, professional and cold. This is James Burke, Ms. Mitchell's attorney. I'm calling to inform you that my client intends to sue you, Mr. Chun and Ms. Huang, for defamation, harassment, and conspiracy to damage her reputation. We're filing papers this afternoon. I almost laughed. Your client is in federal custody for embezzling almost $3 million. Good luck with that lawsuit. My client maintains her innocence, and we have evidence that you three manufactured documents, coordinated a smear campaign, and intentionally destroyed her career. See you in court, Ms. Morrison. He hung up. Tom and Patricia stared at me. What was that? Karen's fighting back. She's suing us for defamation. She can't be serious, Tom said. But c'est was. Because 3 hours later, we were all served with lawsuit papers. Karen Mitchell, currently in federal custody, was suing us for $5 million in damages. Because Karen wasn't done. Even behind bars, she had one more move to move that would force us to prove everything in open court, expose secrets we didn't even know existed, and turn this neighborhood drama into the trial that would determine whether justice actually exists when powerful people fall. Suing her victims while in federal custody. Karen's audacity knows no bounds. Drop a comment. Would you have the courage to stand up to someone like this? The lawsuit was Karen's last desperate play, and everyone knew it. But desperate people are dangerous, and Karen Mitchell had spent 15 years perfecting the art of manipulation. Her attorney, James Burke, was expensive and ruthless. He filed motion after motion delays, discovery requests, demands for depositions. The strategy was obvious: bleed us dry with legal fees until we settled or gave up. But he didn't count on one thing: the neighborhood rallying around us. Within a week, 68 households had contributed to a legal defense fund. Total raised $89,000. Tom found us a lawyer, Marcus Webb, a former prosecutor who specialized in HOA fraud cases, and took our case for a fraction of his usual rate. "I've been waiting for a case like this," Marcus told us at our first meeting. "HOA corruption is rampant, but nobody ever fights back. You three, you're fighting back. Let me help you win." The trial was set for 6 weeks later. Federal court, downtown Atlanta. Karen's criminal case was still pending, but the civil lawsuit moved faster. The courtroom was packed on day one. News cameras weren't allowed inside, but reporters filled every available seat. Karen sat at the defense table in an orange jumpsuit. She'd been denied bail as a flight risk, but somehow she still managed to look composed. Hair perfect. Makeup flawless. Like this was just another HOA meeting. She was dominating. Burke's opening statement was masterful theater. "Ladies and gentlemen, my client stands accused of terrible crimes, but she has not been convicted of anything. In America, we believe in innocent until proven guilty. What we have here is a witch hunt. 3 residents who decided they didn't like their HOA president, manufactured evidence, and destroyed an innocent woman's life. They humiliated her publicly, ruined her reputation, and now she sits in jail, awaiting trial for crimes she didn't commit. This isn't justice. This is persecution." Then Marcus stood up for our side. "The defense would have you believe this is about hurt feelings and neighborhood politics. It's not. This is about $2,700,000 stolen from 73 families over 15 years. This is about forged documents, shell companies, and offshore bank accounts. The FBI has the evidence. Ms. Mitchell's own secretary has the evidence, and we're going to show you everything." The trial lasted 3 days. Burke tried every trick. He attacked Patricia's credibility, called her a disgruntled employee with a grudge. He questioned the authenticity of the USB drive, suggested we'd manufactured the documents. He even tried to paint Karen as a victim of her treasurer's incompetence, claiming Richard had mismanaged funds and Karen was simply taking the fall. But Marcus was better. He called Agent Torres to the stand. She walked the jury through 15 years of bank records, showing exactly how money flowed from the HOA accounts to Karen's shell companies to her offshore accounts. She displayed copies of fake invoices Karen had created, complete with forged signatures and fabricated vendor letters. "This wasn't negligence," Agent Torres testified. "This was sophisticated, premeditated fraud." Ms. Mitchell created an entire ecosystem of fake businesses specifically to embezzle from her own neighbors. He called Patricia next. She cried through most of her testimony, explaining how Karen had threatened her family, how she'd been too terrified to speak up, how she'd finally found the courage to contact the FBI. "I know I did wrong," Patricia sighed, her voice breaking. "I should have stopped her sooner. But I was scared. She had so much power, and when you're scared, you do things you never thought you'd do." Burke tried to destroy her on cross-examination, but Patricia held firm. She had documents. She had dates. She had evidence that couldn't be disputed. Then Marcus called me. I told the jury everything: the $25,000 pet fee, the emergency meeting, the investigation Tom and I had started. I explained how we'd found the discrepancies, how Patricia had come forward, how we'd forced the special election that led to Karen's exposure. "Did you ever manufacture evidence?" Marcus asked. "No." "Did you ever coordinate a smear campaign?" "No." "We coordinated an investigation into financial irregularities. We asked questions we had the right to ask, and when we found evidence of crimes, we brought it to the authorities. That's not defamation. That's due diligence." Burke's cross-examination was aggressive. "Ms. Morrison, you admit you disliked Ms. Mitchell before any of this began." "I didn't like her management style." "No. You thought she was too strict, too demanding." "I thought she was petty and power-hungry." "Yes." "So when you saw an opportunity to take her down, you took it." I looked directly at the jury. When I saw evidence that she was stealing from my neighbors, I investigated. That's not taking someone down. That's protecting my community. Burke tried to rattle me for another 20 minutes, but I didn't break, because I had the truth on my side. And the truth is a powerful shield. Day 3 was Karen's turn. She took the stand in a conservative blue dress. Somehow her lawyer had gotten the judge to allow civilian clothes, and she played the victim beautifully. She talked about her 15 years of service, the long hours, the thankless work, the residents who complained about every little thing. She cried when she described the night she was arrested, how humiliating it felt to be handcuffed in front of her neighbors. I made some accounting errors, she admitted. I trusted vendors who overcharged. I signed contracts without reading every detail. But I never stole anything. Every penny I spent was for the community. Burke walked her through each piece of evidence, and she had an explanation for everything. The shell companies, legitimate vendors she'd hired through referrals, the offshore accounts, investment accounts she'd opened to grow community funds, the Costa Rica property, a retirement home she'd saved 4 years to buy. It was almost believable. Almost. Then Marcus stood up for cross-examination. Ms. Mitchell, you testified that the offshore accounts were investment accounts for community funds. Yes. Then why are they in your name only? Why doesn't the HOA have access to them? Karen hesitated. For security purposes? Security. Marcus held up a bank statement. This shows a withdrawal of $45,000 in March 2023. What community expense was that for? I'd have to check my records. Your records show no HOA expense matching that amount, but your credit card statements show a $42,000 purchase at Tiffany & Co. the same week. Coincidence? Karen's composure cracked. I may have made a personal purchase and then repaid the account with what money? Your HOA president's salary was $12,000 per year. Where did you get $42,000 to repay the account? She had no answer. Marcus destroyed her methodically, piece by piece, expense by expense, lie by lie. By the time he finished, Karen wasn't crying anymore. She was just staring at the table, defeated. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. When they returned, the forewoman stood. On the count of defamation, we find for the defendants. On the count of harassment, we find for the defendants. On the count of conspiracy, we find for the defendants. Karen's face went blank. Furthermore, the forewoman continued, we recommend the court award defendants legal fees and punitive damages in the amount of $250,000 for filing a frivolous lawsuit. The courtroom erupted. Tom grabbed my hand. Patricia sobbed with relief. Karen just sat there, stone-faced, as deputies led her back to her cell. 3 months later, Karen Mitchell was sentenced in her criminal trial. 15 years in federal prison. Full restitution ordered. The HOA recovered approximately $1,800,000 from seized assets, not everything, but enough to rebuild. Patricia received immunity for her cooperation. Richard resigned from the board, but faced no criminal charges. And the neighborhood. We elected a new board, implemented transparent financial reporting, created oversight committees, made sure nothing like this could ever happen again. Tom became the new president. Patricia stayed on. As secretary, she'd earned her redemption. And me. I just went back to being a regular homeowner with a 20-pound French Bulldog who had no idea she'd helped bring down a criminal empire. But sometimes, when I walk Duchess past the community center with its expensive marble floors and ridiculous chandelier, I think about Karen, about how power corrupts, about how easy it is to look the other way when someone else is asking the questions. And I remember, the price of a safe community isn't just HOA dues. It's courage. Karen Mitchell thought she was untouchable. 15 years of stealing, lying, and threatening made her believe she'd built something permanent. But she forgot one thing. Communities are stronger than tyrants. And sometimes, all it takes is one person brave enough to ask, show me the receipts. Justice served, but here's my question for you. How many HOAs out there are hiding their own Karen? Drop a comment with your HOA horror story on. Remember, transparency isn't just good policy. It's survival.